Chapter 29 and Hinata Interlude to 30. I kept my breath smooth and easy as I focused on my surroundings, the sun vanishing into the skyline as I kept perfectly still. I was in my final week of my time in the training ground. The Zetsu had been kicked into overdrive with their desire to kill me, and several of the special enemies had actually come close to doing so. One of the most dangerous had actually been Kai Leng, the assassin of Cerberus. An experienced soldier, outfitted with Reaper cybernetics and high-tech gear. Yeah, it was a pain to beat him. He had the ability to go invisible and summon force fields, not to mention the fact that his sword had been able to cleave through metal with ease thanks to the fact it was a goddamn monomolecular blade. Plus, it could electrify whoever it cut. A sword I now had stashed away in my inventory. But seriously, he was tough, able to deploy a seriously strong field as he applied Medigel to the wounds I inflicted on him and cloaked himself to try and get the drop on me. On the upside, I got proof that my enhanced Sharingan was able to pick up the minute shifting of space that stealth fields made. But I was still alive, and now I was about to attempt to finally put an end to the predator that had been harassing me this entire time. The reptilian bastard had hunted and harassed me for weeks no matter how I modified my camping protection. I was starting to really hate balls of plasma. Hell, when I camped out underground, he freaking blew up the area I was camping in. No respect these days. The sun vanished into the horizon as I waited for the predator to show himself, my enhanced eyes twitching with every movement in the forest around me before I finally noticed something, space warping around in a peculiar manner. I reacted immediately, throwing out a brace of kunai and applying a quick, Kage kunai, jutsu to one of the kunai in the brace before triggering a quick teleport to another location, the forest I chose as my hunting ground being covered with Hiratian kunais at this point. My eyes were wide as I watched the forest for any sign of movement as my kunai tore through the trees, sounding almost like a heavy rainstorm before teleporting into a new location. One thing I learned fighting the predator: never stay in one spot for too long, it made you too predictable. It also didn't help if it came to respect you as prey, it meant that the damn thing didn't underestimate you. Speaking of, I leaned back as a ball of plasma passed through the space my head had been before teleporting to another kunai as an explosion rocked my previous position. I quickly began moving by foot as I spotted my own prey's silhouette. The predator reacted quickly, drawing out his collapsible staff/spear as I descended upon him with my kodachi. The sounds of metal clashing sang through the trees as I pressed against him with an unrelenting attack only for him to shock me as a mine detonated at my feet. A cloud of smoke and debris clouded the predator's vision as the mine went off, the alien taking some splash damage himself, even as he threw himself back, only to be immediately beset upon as I came hurtling out of the forest, flanked by another two MES. His shock was visible as three of my shadow clones clashed with him, even from my position, hidden in a tree, a cloak lined with temperature-regulating seals and a number of other ones that would hide me from his vision as I continually attacked him with my shadow clones, waiting for him to be moved into position. And honestly, the shadow clones were awesome, but seriously impractical unless you were both an Uzumaki and a Jinchuriki. It cut my chakra in half every time I used it, so making the 7 clones I did drop me to only hundreds of chakra points remaining, out of my tens of thousands. Seriously, only reason Naruto-kun was able to make as many as he could, was because of the frankly, insane amount of base chakra he had, and the ridiculous regeneration rate the Kyuubi granted to him. Even Rashi and Han admitted they wouldn't be able to spam the jutsu like Naruto-kun was able to. But, it would be worth it, because somehow, the predator figured out how to track chakra, and with mine being so low, and my control suppressing it even further, it basically made it look like I had no chakra within me. Letting out another small breath, I restrained myself from making any moves as the predator got even closer, another one of my clones vanishing as he managed to get through its guard, only for it to be replaced by another clone as they pushed it into position. I held my breath, each one of my muscles tensing as he got closer, before finally, the tension snapped as I launched forward, not making a single sound as he focused solely on the clones in front of him. Right before my sword slid into his chest and some of my remaining chakra detonated within him as a sort of scalpel bomb, choosing to ruin every organ, rather than surgically choosing specific ones. A wet gurgling sound came from the predator's throat before it twitched its arm to bring it around, only for a clone to step forward, cutting it off smoothly seconds before the predator vanished in a flash of light. You have assassinated the prefect hunter, the predator. Looted and stored the hunter's mask in your inventory. I blinked in response as I stared at the alert box before letting out a happy sigh as I dismissed my remaining clones. Thank Kami, that is done with, I groaned out as I moved into the forest towards my camp, letting out a long, tired yawn. I need to sleep, been planning that out since his last attack on my camp. Shaking my head, I leapt up into the hammock I had set up and closed my eyes, allowing myself to slip into a light doze. A special enemy has arrived to investigate the death of a number of Zetsu. I carefully eyed the pop-up in front of me warily. I only had 5 hours remaining before the end of my time here in the training zone, so something told me to be careful for who the enemy is. So I began searching, keeping myself carefully hidden as I moved through the zones, feeling a strange tension as I tried to locate my target, only to find nothing. A frown flickered on my face as I crouched on a tree branch. It was strange, but whomever my friend summoned here was a master at stealth, equaling even me as I was unable to locate him. Which was troublesome because that meant I wouldn't be sure that he could see me. I was jerked out of my contemplation as a strange scent filled the air before my eyes widened as I flooded my lungs with healing chakra, purging the poison that was starting to fill them as I leapt away. A crack echoed as a part of the branch exploded from an impact of a bullet. I quickly tracked where the shot came from and teleported using one of the many kunai I had scattered through the forest. Well, that's troubling. Someone had got the drop on me for once. Been a while since that's happened. So poison and some type of rifle, not a lot to go on, but a start. I began ghosting my way through the forest with a frown on my face. If he was able to find me, then I guess I would just have to give him something else to look for. Triggering another teleportation, I formed a single shadow clone before the two of us teleported again, the two of us repeating the process, leaving each of me with a quarter of my total chakra and, hopefully, confusing my opponent trying to figure out who the real me was. A scarce minute or so after I teleported away, I jerked in surprise as two of my clones were destroyed, one by some kind of explosive, while the other one was beheaded from behind. Who the hell was doing this? A snarl almost escaped my throat as me and my final clone leapt from our perches and vanished into the ground. I was noticed to being outclassed anymore, even if I was sure I could crush whoever it was in seconds if I went all out. My own pride refused to allow me to break my self-imposed rules. Okay, Yuriko, calm down, getting angry won't help anything. I let out a calming breath as I moved through the ground, my clone moving in the opposite direction as I began to call on the more tactical part of my mind. Whoever was attacking me was a master of stealth, assassination, and traps, so basically I should treat this like I was fighting myself. So, if the situation was reversed, what would Ito? I would turn my opponent's actions against them, like he was doing already. Okay, so what would be the best way to break the pattern? By not playing the same game as my opponent. But that would mean breaking my own rules. Is it worth letting yourself get killed? Well, that puts things into perspective. Coming to my decision, I sent my clone up to the surface where it had one goal, cause as much chaos as it possible could before it was dispelled, either from a lack of chakra, or by being killed. And oh boy, did it ever, starting off with a fire release, heaven-quenching flames, that set nearly the entire forest on fire with the Zetsu dropping like flies, only to spawn back into the flames, and die again. After that, my clone was forming another set of seals when it was killed, only this time, I was able to see my opponent as he killed my clone, an older-looking man. From how he moved he seemed like that anyways, with an orange and black mask and similar colored armor. Only one person matched that description. Slade Wilson, Deathstroke the Terminator. No wonder who was able to get the drop on me so often. Also, the forest is a no-go. Without my clone to control the flow of chakra, the firestorm it had started was running rampant. So, that left one of the other biomes to fight Slade in. After a moment's consideration, I ended up choosing the grasslands, and pulled myself out of the ground and dusted myself off, waiting for my opponent to show themselves as the fire raged in the background. I tilted my head with a smirk as a bullet brushed past me as I began to move a bit, my enhanced eyes seeing each and every bullet being fired by the modified rifle hidden in Slade's staff. I formed a single seal with my hand and inhaled. Fire release, fire dragon song. I intoned before spitting out a dragon-shaped flame that swept through the area that Slade was taking his shots from, my eyes catching his movements. I cut him off from hiding from me again as I slashed at him, the supervillain catching my sword with his staff and spun it to try and knock me off balance. I simply chose to let go of my sword as I inhaled again and let out a fire release, great fireball, directly into his face as I leapt away from him, my Sharingan morphing as I triggered Kamae no Neo, and Aim no Okihashi, to surround him with several more fireballs converging on his position. A scream of pain echoed through the plains as the surrounding ground caught fire from my attacks as I formed a set of seals that I completed as he came charging out of the flames, the cloth parts of his armor having burned away, showing his slowly healing skin. Earth release, crushing the heavens, I announced in a cold voice as the earth began to rumble beneath us before the ground began to tear and rise into the air, dragging the mercenary assassin with it as he was clipped by several of the larger chunks. I smirked as he and chunks of rock and earth reached at least 500 feet into the air before I raised one of my hands, and then chopped it down, prompting the chunks to start propelling themselves towards the ground at near terminal velocity, dragging Slade with them. I quickly formed the ribcage of my Susanoo to protect me from the sudden rocking of the earth as I essentially dropped several meteorites into the ground around me. Even as the clouds of dust and debris covered my vision, I held an out as I began to channel chakra, forming a Rasengan, before morphing it into my Rasenkan, waiting for the debris to dissipate, or my opponent to show themselves. This I wasn't briefed about. A gasping, rasping voice called out as the dust began to settle. The client didn't say anything about elemental control. I smirked a bit. Because I decided to break my rules, just for you, Slade, I announced as my Susanoo receded, trying to conserve my remaining chakra before turning to face him, wincing a bit. Honestly, the man was a mess, missing an arm, large gashes that were struggling to close, his mask shattered as the man glared at me. But really, I should commend you. It's not often that I find somebody superior to me in something, so, honestly, good work. You really are the best assassin I have encountered, period. Slade grunted as he slowly dragged himself to his feet, struggling to pull out his sword from his back as he pointed it at me. I will complete my job. He panted heavily as he coughed up blood. I chuckled a bit in response as I held out my Rasenkan. That is a good work ethic to have, I said to him honestly. Really, a shame I have to kill you here. I would have loved to have you in my village. That wasn't even a lie. If Slade had been able to get the drop on me, then he would have been able to do so much in my world. But, alas, that isn't in the cards. Sorry about that. I launched myself forward, Slade letting out a defiant roar as I closed in on him, before trying to slash out at me, only for me to sidestep the clumsy, off-center swing before ramming the Rasenkan into his chest, the man letting out a choked scream of pain before vanish in a flash of light, seconds before everything for me flashed out of existence. You have killed Slade Wilson, Deathstroke the Terminator. Modified ballistic staff looted and stored in inventory. Quest complete. Survived in the zone for 25 days. Bonus objective: assassinated 25 special enemies. Completed killed 10,000 white Zetsus. Completed assassinated the hunter. Completed killed 1,000 white Zetsus with traps. Completed remain undetected for the entire quest. Incomplete quest reward 1 million EXP plus 500,000 bonus EXP per bonus objective. 2 million EXP gained. EXP from kills will now be tallied. Tally complete. 2,500,000 experience points gained from kills. You have leveled up 21 times. 115 skill points to spend. You have broken past level 100. Title, God of Shinobi, has been earned. God of Shinobi, you are considered to be untouchable by the average shinobi, you are what they aspire to be. Plus 100% reputation with all allied shinobi, plus 10% damage with all ninja arts. Perk, Aura of Absolute Command, gained. Aura of Absolute Command. Your status of being a god of shinobi gives weight to your words. When allies are fighting nearby, they are inspired by your presence. When enemies fight nearby, they will be frightened by your presence. Naruto frowned as he looked down at the ceiling array his sensei was showing him. Training under Jiraiya was an interesting experience for the young teen who was used to the strict no-nonsense training of Yuriko, or the absolute limit-pushing extremism of Kakashi. Compared to those types of training, Jiraiya's laid-back, relaxed approach to training really threw him off. Not that he didn't appreciate the ability to relax between his grueling training periods as he prepared himself for the finals of the Chunin exam. But, that didn't mean that Jiraiya's training wasn't challenging in its own way. Between trying to get his new Toad's summons approval, which he had after remaining on the boss back for nearly a full day as it did its best to knock him off. Then after that, it was a process of trying to work the Toads into his fighting style and finding the best Toads he worked with to make them his familiars, who turned out to be the two sons of the current boss summon, Gamakichi and Gamatatsu. All the while Jiraiya had him working on his understanding of the sealing arts and their application in battle outside of explosive notes and barriers. In fact, that was a lesson Naruto learned the hard way after Jiraiya thoroughly trounced him using Onlyfuinjutsu in a spar. So, Naruto set to work learning more about the art beyond what his sister had taught him. Which really wasn't anything against her mastery of it. According to Jiraiya, the two of them just took different approaches to its applications in battle. If I wanted to break this seal, then I would start here, Naruto informed as he pointed out a section of the seal. It's the weakest point that leads to the core of the array. Jiraiya nodded as he pulled it back. Exactly, he said approvingly before looking up into the sky. Right, looks like it's getting to that time. he announced after a moment, dusting himself off as he stood up. I think your sister should be getting back home today too, is that right? Yeah, I can't wait to show her how much stronger I've gotten. Naruto announced cheerfully as he climbed to his feet, a broad smile on his face as he stretched out. Well, make sure you keep some surprises for the Chunin exams, Jiraiya advised with a smile. Remember, a good shinobi always keeps an ace or two up their sleeves. Right. Naruto replied, throwing the Sannin a salute before he began to run home. Later. Erosenin. He chuckled a bit as he caught the groan of the older man in the background before focusing his attention to the path before him as he made his way home. Naruto. Sasuke called out in greeting as the Uchiha landed next to him and matched pace. How was training? Hey, Sasuke, Naruto greeted in return, high-fiving his brother in response. It went pretty good, actually, just putting the finishing touches on some things. You? About the same, Sasuke said, the two of them sharing a grin at their unsubtle attempts of getting info on the other's training. So, Nei-san should be back today, right? Yeah, wonder how much stronger she'd gotten. Naruto mused in contemplation. Honestly, she was already pretty strong in his opinion, and she seemed pretty content with her level of strength. Wonder why she felt the need to take some time off to do some training. I mean, it takes Rashi and II and Hansen teaming up to get her to take a break just to relax. Sasuke shrugged a bit as he eyed a group of Chunin who seemed to be just hanging around. I think something is happening, he murmured quietly. A lot more shinobi have been on the streets as of late, and in key positions while looking like they're just hanging out. Naruto nodded, his fingers twitching in a signal. Preparation for an attack. Sasuke shrugged in response. Anyways, let's get home, he grunted out. I'm starving. Kakashi-sensei had been working on endurance training, which meant he had me skipping lunch to work on managing my caloric output. Naruto winced, in sympathy, with the Kyuubi inside of him supercharging his natural healing factor to the point of near regeneration. The amount of calories he went through in a day was crazy, enough so that he had specially made high-calorie energy bars in his equipment pouch, just to be on the safe side. That sucks, Naruto sympathized as they approached the apartment building and Wall ran up to the top floor balcony. A familiar face greeted them as soon as they returned. Nei-san. Naruto shouted exuberantly as she leapt at his sister in a flying hug that she easily caught with a small laugh. Hello to you too, Naruto-kun, Sasuke-kun, Yuriko greeted the pair warmly. You two have definitely grown. The pair preened under her praise as Sasuke accepted his own hug with his sister. Now, both of you, go and get ready for dinner, she informed the two of them with a smile. We can catch up as we eat. Okay, the two of them chorused cheerfully, happy that their sister figure was back in Konoha. I let out a small sigh as I looked through my stats and checked the number of stat points I had available, reclining in bed, leaning against Rashi as he read a scroll that had been lent to him by Jiraiya. With over 100 stat points available to me, I definitely had my choices on what to increase. I decided to try and keep my balance, somewhat, with adding 40 points to my dexterity, 20 points to both my intelligence and wisdom, 15 points to strength and vitality and the last 5 points into my luck stat, which I still hadn't quite figured out. Name, Yuriko level, 102 EXP, for 021/650-000 age, 23 gender, female title, Uchiha clan head, plus 50% to all reputation gains, command of the Uchiha clan, secondary title, god of shinobi, plus 50% to all stats plus 100% reputation with all allied shinobi plus 10% damage with all ninja arts. Skill, Aura of Absolute Command, active, stats, current HP, 20,025 CP, 95,800 STR, 115, 201, INT, 160, 240, DX, 200, 350, VIT, 115, 201, WS, 160, 240, LUK, 50, 75, Rio, 342,761,998. For reaching 200 DX, you have unlocked a new perk. Godlike reflexes, your base speed, evasiveness, and accuracy increased by 100%. In addition, your mental processing of what you see is increased by 100%. I blinked at the screen in front of me before letting out a sigh and closing both of them as I leant into Rashi a bit more. It's good to have a real bed again, I murmured quietly as I allowed myself to relax. Rashi chuckled in amusement next to me. I know how that feels, he agreed in amusement as he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Especially since I started living with you, rich people get the best of beds. I giggled a bit in amusement. It's why we became rich, so we can have good beds, I joked lightly, Rashi joining my laughter. Rashi. Rashi replied with a questioning hum. I love you, I mumbled out as I felt my eyes droop tiredly now that I was actually able to completely relax. I love you too, Rashi told me, his voice sounding a bit distant for some reason. Have a good sleep, Yuriko. I tried to respond only for incomprehensible mumble to come out as I fell into a deep sleep. I felt really relaxed as I moved through the streets of Konoha, heading towards the Hokage's tower for my debriefing with Hiruzen-sama. A full night's of complete rest without having to be on the lookout for any threats re-energizing me completely. I never really realized just how good I felt after a good night's sleep until I had to keep an eye out for an overly aggressive asshole of a super hunter all night. For a month. Never again. I waved a few times to people who called out to me in greeting before entering the tower and headed up to Hiruzen's office, whose door was open. Jonin Yuriko Uchiha, reporting in after training leave, Hokage-sama, I reported in respectfully as Hiruzen looked me over carefully, his eyes widening a bit. It certainly has been productive, hasn't it? He questioned, smiling at me proudly. The way you hold yourself, it reminds me of the Shodai. I blinked in surprise at his words, my head tilting up but as I studied him. I believe, you have reached the same level of power as Hashirama-sama and I, although, my strength certainly has waned in the last few years, he told me. I know that people will be calling you the fourth god of shinobi. My back stiffened in response as I took that in. While I certainly had the title now, for the public to call me that, would be another matter altogether. Letting out a breath, I relaxed myself before smiling a bit at the Hokage. Well, I'm not one to do things by half, I said with a slight smirk. Although, I am never going to do that kind of training again if I can help it, I almost died half a dozen times. Hiruzen-sama chuckled a bit in amusement as he gestured for me to sit at the chair next to his side of the desk. I know the feeling of that, he commented as I sat down. I remember my days of training, they were intense and just as dangerous. Somehow, I doubted he had to fight the likes of Kai Leng, the Shredder and Deathstroke, let alone the Predator, as mere training. I'm just glad it's done with, I admitted. How have things been in the village? Quiet, mostly. Anoki and Terumi-san will be arriving tomorrow with their retinues, he explained calmly as he lit up his pipe. The Kazekage will be arriving the day after. There have been some movements outside of our walls. Orochimaru thinks his people are subtle, but they're not. I nodded in understanding as I considered the situation. I am ready to deal with them whenever you deem it time, I told him, getting a smile and nod in response. I know you will be, but it would be best for us to strike when they are at their most confident, he informed knowingly. Break them when they feel strongest, and scatter them as they recoil in fear. It will be done, I assured with a smile. I know, he replied. Now, you mind giving me a hand? I would like this pile cleared before the other Kages arrive. I smiled as I moved closer to his desk and started helping him with his paperwork. End chapter. Yuriko's stats name, Yuriko level, 102 EXP, for 021/650-000 age, 23 gender, female title, Uchiha clan head, plus 50% to all reputation gains, command of the Uchiha clan, secondary title, god of shinobi, plus 50% to all stats plus 100% reputation with all allied shinobi plus 10% damage with all ninja arts. Skill, Aura of Absolute Command, active, stats, current HP, 20,025 CP, 95,800 STR, 115, 201, INT, 160, 240, DX, 200, 350, VIT, 115, 201, WS, 160, 240, LUK, 50, 75, Rio, 342,761,998. New perks, Aura of Absolute Command. Your status of being a god of shinobi gives weight to your words. When allies are fighting nearby, they are inspired by your presence. When enemies fight nearby, they will be frightened by your presence. Godlike reflexes, your base speed, evasiveness, and accuracy increased by 100%. In addition, your mental processing of what you see is increased by 100%. If one were to ask Hinata Hyuga what she felt like the turning point of her life would be, she would have a very quick answer: the day Yuriko Uchiha saved her from her kidnappers. Ever since that day, her life had been turned onto its head, with Yuriko being insistent that she became friends with her wards, Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha, and really, she couldn't complain about that, as she was pretty certain Yuriko knew about her crush on Naruto, what with how often the clan had pushed the two of them into situations together. Still, the young Hyuga heiress couldn't find it in herself to complain about that, considering it allowed her to get closer with her crush, plus the amount of training that Yuriko had given her had heaped confidence upon her. After all, one didn't tell Yuriko that they couldn't do something unless they had a really good reason for it. So, when Yuriko told her to put in her best effort, she did, and with each success she had, her confidence grew, and as her confidence grew, she had more successes, creating a cycle of growth for the young woman. So, it was quite understandable that when she won her bout in the prelims that she was excited for the upcoming final exam. Right up until the Hokage dropped the surprising news, there was going to be a second prelim round to reduce the numbers further, until only 10 of them remained, and unfortunately, it didn't look like luck smiled down upon her, as her name immediately came up, pitting her against Gaara. After seeing what he had done, and almost done, to her cousin Neji's teammate, she had no hesitation against immediately conceding the match. Confident in her skills she may have been, but Hinata knew when she was outmatched and Gaara was beyond her ability to defeat without both ambushing and killing him. Even then, the Hyuga heiress was not confident that she would succeed in dealing a blow to him before being trapped by his sand. Even her father wasn't disappointed with her choice in conceding the match, rather, he had quietly praised her for her sound judgment in assessing a foe. One requirement of a chunin was to be able to properly assess a situation and judge its viability, after all. While the first round had been of the trust between teammates as well as information gathering, and the second a trial of their practical teamwork, ninja skills, and their ability not to mess with mission-specific items, the matchups in the third round preliminaries were a subtle test of the genin's ability to measure up their opponent and deliberate the likelihood of victory over defeat. Apparently, Hokage-sama had made note of her decision and she was almost guaranteed to be promoted in the next chunin exam if she did as well as she had in this one. Yuriko-sama, no, San, damn it, had agreed with him as well. But, she wasn't going to let her disappointment in her recent failure to keep her down, especially since Naruto-kun kept pushing her forward with his encouragement, and he had even roped her into helping with his training, considering his first opponent was her cousin. But he wasn't asking for what skills he had, or what jutsu he used, he merely wanted more experience with fighting a Hyuga. There was also something the two of them figured out rather quickly. Naruto was able to reopen his Tenketsubi, channeling a bit of the Kyuubi's chakra through his coils. Although the Bijou was apparently annoyed with being used in such a way, Naruto was able to work out some kind of agreement with the Kyuubi to get its help for the chunin exams, something about beating Sasuke into the dirt. Hinata personally found it amazing he was able to convince the cankerous Bijou to actualize something, considering that everything she heard from Naruto was how stingy the Kyuubi was with its chakra. All of which led to today, the final day of the chunin exams. And it certainly felt like it. The air was charged with an unfamiliar energy to the young Hyuga, with her noticing her father and several other shinobi sitting nearby looking rather tense as they looked down at the arena below the seating where the chunin hopefuls were gathering. Before them, standing tall and proud, was Yuriko, a woman that many kunoichi admired and strove to be like, Hinata included. She was scanning the crowd, judging the number of people before turning her attention to the Kage box where the Hokage sat with the Kazekage. Hinata could see the Uchiha nod to some unseen signal sent to her before turning back to the crowd. Then she spoke. For Hinata, she had long since understood a natural law about Yuriko Uchiha from growing up with her around near constantly. When she spoke, you listened, and now, it felt like reality itself understood that lesson as the crowd grew almost eerily silent. Congratulations to you 10, she announced in an even tone as she addressed the assembled genin before her. With the aid of your teammates you have made it past the first two trials, and now you must prove your ability as an individual before all who have gathered here today. Most of the genin shifted nervously as they looked around at the crowd that now had their full attention on them. Hinata's heart sped up as she saw Naruto-kun smirking confidently as usual though. It was something that never failed to make her admire him, he never let anything get him down for long, not even this kind of situation. However, this is not just a test of your prowess in combat, Yuriko continued. This is also a test of your ability to adapt. The opponent you may think you are facing may change, you will not get a chance to recover as much stamina as you would like, making you have to fight tactically to ensure that you have enough strength for the following fights. Her eyes swept over the genin with a hard look. I hope the 10 of you truly do understand this, she commented dryly. Now then, Naruto Uzumaki, Neji Hyuga, remain, the rest of you go up to the competitor's box, we shall begin shortly. Hinata swallowed as she saw Naruto exchange brief words with his teammates before turning to face Neji, who was getting himself focused for the fight. It was time to see just how much Naruto's training paid off. End interlude. Character stats: name, Sarutobi Hiruzen level, 95 age, 69 primary title, Sandaime Hokage secondary title, 3rd god of shinobi stats HP, 15,625 CP, 139,650, 50,000 available, STR, 125 INT, 350 DX, 175 VIT, 125 WS, 399 LUK -100. Perks, Frailty of Age. Not many shinobi live to old age for a reason. As your body gets older, it will physically grow weaker with each passing year. STR stat will dwindle with each year you gain and your chakra reserves will be reduced. Wisdom of Experience. Your age has given you experience that few can match, and with that experience comes wisdom and intelligence, leaving those as the only thing you can rely on as your body begins to fail. Your INT and WS stats increases are doubled. Aura of Absolute Command. Your status of being a god of shinobi gives weight to your words. When allies are fighting nearby, they are inspired by your presence. When enemies fight nearby, they will be frightened by your presence. Name, Jiraiya level, 93 age, 51 title, Legendary Sannin secondary title, Toad Sage stats HP, 55,750 CP, 36,400 STR, 223 INT, 182 DX, 130 VIT, 250 WS, 200 LUK -87. Perks, Toad Summoner, access to Sage Mode technique and off shorts, can summon toads to aid you. Super Pervert, you are the gold standard to perverts everywhere, they bow to your name and worship your books. Spymaster, hands down, considered to be one of the greatest spymasters in the shinobi world, simply because, no one believes that you really are the spymaster of Konoha. Name, Rashi level, 85 age, 32 title, Jinchuriki of the Yanbi, plus 2 VIT per level, plus 400% CP, secondary title, stats HP, 32,340 CP, 61,992 STR, 147 INT, 126 DX, 197 VIT, 220 WS, 123 LUK -52. Perks, Jinchuriki, you had the misfortune of having a chakra beast sealed within you from a young age. While you may be hated and feared by some, this does not come without some benefits. Plus 200% CP regeneration, regenerate 10 HP per second while channeling your Biju's chakra. Chakra cloak techniques available, Boiling Earth. You can melt the very earth and create volcanoes, should you so desire, let's hope you don't. Access to lava release techniques. Sage training. Through some means you have been trained in the use of nature chakra and are able to bring the might of nature forth in your own body. Access to sage techniques. Name, Han level, 83 age, 37 title, Jinchuriki of the Gobi, plus 2 VIT per level, plus 500% CP, secondary title, stats HP, 42,364 CP, 119,680 STR, 178 INT, 136 DX, 150 VIT, 238 WS, 176 LUK -67. Perks, Jinchuriki, you had the misfortune of having a chakra beast sealed within you from a young age. While you may be hated and feared by some, this does not come without some benefits. Plus 200 CP regeneration, regenerate 10 HP per second while channeling your Biju's chakra. Chakra cloak techniques available, Steam Explosion, you can cover your enemies in steam and boil them alive. Really, if you think about it, that is just plain scary. Access to steam release. Taijutsu Expert, you devoted yourself to hitting this as hard as you can, and now you break bones as easily as you would break boards. Plus 50% damage with Taijutsu techniques. I struggled to keep my face perfectly neutral as I watched Naruto-kun engage Neji in combat, keeping a careful distance away from the pair as Naruto sent a dozen shadow clones to engage the Hyuga. Despite my prodding of them, the pair refused to tell me what they learned in their training nor what their plans were for fighting their opponents, wanting all of it to be a surprise for me. But I did have some idea, but when a butterfly flaps its wings and all that. I briefly turned my attention up to the Kage's box where Hiruzen-sama sat with the other Kages, including Orochimaru disguised as the Kazekage. Hopefully that Tsuchikage and Mizukage would be willing to help Hiruzen-sama out when the time came, but either way, we were prepared for when Orochimaru made his move. I brought my attention back to the fight when Naruto let out a curse as Neji broke through the screen of shadow clones to charge Naruto himself and actually scoring a blow, a triumphant look on his face, one that quickly dissolved into confusion as Naruto exploded into smoke. His surprise was short-lived as he rolled to the side to avoid a displacement of the wind that shot out from the clones he broke past earlier, each of the clones sharing a grin as they brought up their hands into a familiar cross-shaped seal. I smirked a bit as I realized Naruto's strategy. If he kept dividing his chakra evenly amongst his clones, then it would fool Neji's Byakugan that relied mostly on scanning chakra to pick out illusions and clones, making the shadow clone, when used right, a counter for that vision. Basically Naruto was playing a shell game with Neji, and with how quickly he could recharge his chakra, there wasn't as much of a drawback if someone such as myself used it. And Neji was falling for it hook, line and sinker. I almost missed it completely, but Naruto actually slipped away in the smoke created from the creation of the shadow clones and started using an underground movement technique to get out of visual sight and outside of the range of Neji's Byakugan. I wasn't quite sure what his plan was, however, as Neji would be able to see him approach from below with the help of his Byakugan. Although the Byakugan did only see a dome around the user, not a perfect sphere as most imagined. If Naruto-kun knew about that. It would be interesting seeing how this turned out, as Naruto-kun had a rather strong tactical streak in him when the mood struck him. This was evident not only in this timeline, but in the original one too. Who else would think of modifying a joke of a technique like the Konoha secret finger jutsu, 1000 years of death, and using it against a half-transformed Gaara so successfully? And after working with both his father and mother, I knew exactly who he got it from. After all, as much as I respected him, Minato-sama could be as dense as a sack of bricks when it came to tactical planning, although his improvisational skills were pretty high up there. My attention was pulled away from my musings as Neji destroyed the final clone and was looking around in confusion for Naruto-kun, who apparently had been waiting for this very moment as the ground literally exploded beneath Neji, throwing the Hyuga into the air while a blur of blonde hair leapt up after him. I blinked in realization of his plan. The Hyuga Juken seemed to take several cues from Bagwazang, a Chinese martial art. And both had a reliance for firm footing to bring out the full force of their strikes. It seemed Naruto-kun's plan was to deprive Neji of the stability of the ground and reduce his effectiveness and ability to move or dodge. It was a good plan and well executed. The Byakugan was not good at seeing down, making attacks from there an excellent way to bypass the all-seeing eyes of the Hyuga clan. It wouldn't work on Hinata-chan, because of how well she knew the way Naruto-kun's mind worked, and it wouldn't work against Neji either, because, credit given where credit was due, he was a true genius when it came to the gentle fist. Which he proved when he began to rotate, but rather than using the rotation, defensive technique, he was instead using the rotation of his body to add the needed strength to his blows as he attempted to counter Naruto's attacks. I couldn't help the smile that bloomed on my face as I watched the pair duel in the air for several moments before gravity began to take hold of them and drag them back to the ground. Naruto was still moving, dashing away from Neji as soon as their feet touched the ground as Neji chased after him. At this point, with his initial plan fizzling out, Naruto was aiming to turn this into a battle of attrition, it seems, sapping Neji's strength by forcing him to keep up with Naruto if he wanted to be able to hit him at all, and while it was indeed a fine strategy, especially since Naruto could outlast a lot of people with his Jinchuriki status. However, there was a problem with this aspect of his plan, namely, Neji was a student of Might Guy, who was one of the very best when it came to helping others develop their stamina and speed for use in taijutsu. The result was a struggle for Naruto-kun, who despite all the training he had undergone over the years, was still inexperienced when it came to actual combat. Meanwhile, Neji was an experienced genin with just as much training as Naruto-kun. I suppressed a wince as I saw Neji land a couple of hits on Naruto-kun's upper thighs, no doubt sealing the tenketsu from the yelp elicited from Naruto-kun's throat as he missed his next step and toppled to the ground. A frown came across my face as Neji began to monologue at Naruto-kun, nothing about the fate spiel like he did in canon, but rather about relying on the big name backing him to get him through his career as a shinobi, making me roll my eyes. Although, Naruto-kun's response made me suppress an undignified bark of laughter as he quickly knocked Neji's feet out from underneath him before delivering a vicious heel drop directly to Neji's solar plexus before climbing back to his feet and taking in a breath. My eyebrow rose as crimson-red chakra swirled around Naruto-kun for a moment before settling as Naruto-kun hopped from foot to foot as Neji tried to get his breath back. He wasn't given any time to recover, however, as Naruto-kun was suddenly on him with a powerful kick to Neji's side that sent him rolling as Naruto-kun began to form some hand seals. Wind release, vacuum shockwave. Naruto-kun declared before launching a visible distortion in the air at Neji, who was unable to recover in time to block the attack, sending him flying across the arena. I blinked as I moved closer to him with a quick burst of speed, and looked him over with a practiced eye. Neji Hyuga is unable to continue. I declared in a loud voice. The winner is Naruto Uzumaki. The crowd erupted into cheers as Naruto let out an exuberant cheer, leaping a bit in the air as he threw his fist up. Good work, Naruto-kun, I murmured to him under my breath, getting a beaming smile from him in response before he took off to the contenders box to watch the next bout as Neji was escorted off the field by a team of medics. I glanced up to the Kage box, seeing Hiruzen-sama speaking with the Tsuchikage about something or other as the Mizukage tried to engage with the disguised Orochimaru in conversation, only to receive short and clipped replies from the traitor. I turned my attention back to the arena as Kuratsuchi and Chojuro came to the center. I gave them the usual explanation of the rules and got confirmation of their readiness before declaring that the match has started and backed away to a safe distance. I'll be honest, I zoned out there about a bit as I scanned the crowd. It wasn't that they weren't skilled or well trained, but more of the fact that I had very little tying me to them. I paid enough attention to play referee and call the end of the match while also judging their performance. But the majority of my attention was looking for any indication of the Suna/Oto attack beginning. Unfortunately, Orochimaru's minions were rather good at blending in with the crowd, it seems, as no one was standing out to me. I turned my eyes back to the dueling pair of genin before me as they separate from an intense taijutsu exchange, the pair of them panting a bit as they eyed one another for any signs of exploitable weaknesses. I saw the two of them brace to charge one another once again before feathers began clouding my vision. I quickly pulsed my chakra, disrupting the genjutsu before it took hold as an explosion rocked the Kage box. Looks like Orochimaru is starting early. Shit. My attention turned to the contenders box as it exploded with sand as Gaara began attacking Sasuke-kun and Naruto-kun relentlessly. I frowned as I watched the two of them start to lead him away from the Colosseum and the panicking civilians and felt the desire to chase after them before squashing it. I had to have faith that they could handle Gaara. I had my own mission to accomplish. Defend the citizens. I shouted commandingly to the shinobi in the crowd. Get them to the shelters. The genin immediately leapt into action, supporting the Chunin and Jonin, engaging the Oto/Suna forces as Baki appeared in the arena across from me, a serious look on his face as he looked ready to try and stop me. Fortunately for him, I was not interested in dealing with him. Genma, I commanded, causing the bandana-wearing Jonin to appear next to me. Deal with him, I'll link up with the others. Right, Genma nodded, a grin on his face as he rolled his senbon between his teeth. I'll deal with things here. You're not going anywhere. Baki shouted as he launched himself at me, Genma not even bothering to stop him as I smirked at the Sunanin before vanishing in a yellow flash. My last sight of Baki was the wide-eyed realization that things were about to go sideways for his side. Report, I commanded as I appeared on the wall that surrounded the village. Got about a 400 to 500 shinobi out there, mixture of Oto and Suna forces, with about maybe 300 to 350 inside Konoha. Aoi responded from his position, looking over at me with a smirk. So, in all, child's play really. I smiled back at my teammate from our genin days, Chika stepping up to my other side with a grin of her own. Just as I had grown as changed, as have my two friends, Aoi was wearing the standard flak vest with a black muscle shirt and a pair of lightweight gauntlets, his face sporting several new scars and a slightly weary look, although his eyes still held determination. Chika herself was now wearing a ANBU-like outfit, a reminder of her time within the outfit as one of their poison specialists before leaving their service when I requested her as one of my guards. Her once long hair had been cut down to her earlobes while her eyes dulled a bit, although she had gained a rather dry sense of humor that she didn't have before. Especially considering that we've lined the entire area with those seal tags you've give us, Chika said with a low chuckle. They're going to be in for quite the shock. I smirked in response as I stepped forward. Be ready to deal with the stragglers when I finish up, she announced to the gathered troops. Once the civilians have been evacuated, the shinobi stationed inside the village will be pushing the intruders out. Be ready to catch them when they try to leave. Let out walls be the anvil. The shinobi didn't roar out or shout in confirmation, they merely got into position and braced themselves for combat, each and every one of them a veteran of the 3rd Shinobi War like myself. I'm heading out, I told my two teammates, who nodded in confirmation as I stepped off the wall that surrounded our village and began my approach towards the approaching army. Kosuke Minoru was a veteran of not only the 3rd Shinobi War, but also the 2nd, his age only proving his skill and position as an elite jonin of Sunagakure, and while he may not agree with the Kazekage on going to war with Konoha, their forces were just too strong and had too many allies to call upon. In his opinion, he would still follow through on his orders and take the walls of Konohagakure. Ha! They're only sending out a single woman. One of the Oto jonin near his position shouted out jeeringly. This will be too easy. It's Yuriko Uchiha. A forward Suna Chunin shouted in counterpoint to the Oto Jonins. Really, these new allies of theirs were highly undisciplined, with Kosuke recognizing several of them from the bingo book as high traitors to their countries, but they also all looked down upon the Suna contingent and were more concerned with splitting the spoils before they actually won the fight. But still, Kosuke recognized the name, both from the briefing that named her as one of the bigger threats they could field, and recognition from the Third War. Hell, he owed her his life. She had kept him alive on the battlefield long enough for him to be transported back to HQ and full medical attention. Still, she was outnumbered by a large margin, what made her so confident that she would approach on her own like tea. Unfortunately, Kosuke Minoru would never be able to complete his pondering, as with a flash of yellow, Yuriko slashed him and several others in half with a single slash of her kodachi as she appeared in their midst. I barely reacted to the blood that sprayed into my face as I stood amongst the enemy forces, giving them a moment to process what just happened. Hirashin. One of the Suna shinobi stammered out fearfully, seconds before I zeroed in on another marker for the Hirashin and appeared over there, in the midst of another group where I quickly slashed out with my kodachi, wrapping my kodachi with my chakra flow, chakra scalpel, as I sliced through the shinobi surrounding me before teleporting to another group and left a bundle of explosive tags at their feet and teleported back at the front of the army as they finally began to react. I smirked smugly as I stood before them with my base, Sharingan, active. "Welcome to Konoha," I told them calmly, getting their attention to my location. "Thank you for visiting, I hope you enjoyed the sights because now you are no longer welcome here." They looked nervously at one another as I stood before them before one of the Odo shinobi spoke up. "It's just one woman," he shouted out. "If we take her out, Orochimaru-sama promised us one of her eyes." I rose an eyebrow at that as my smirk widened. "Oh. You think it's that simple?" I questioned as I began to walk forward, sheathing my kodachi as I moved. "Here, I'll give you all a handicap and not use my kodachi." That got a response from the crowd of shinobi as I stung at their pride, several of them moving forward to get around and flank me. I didn't even bother to stop them as this was exactly I wanted. Right now, I was planning on mimicking Madara in canon when he fought the allied forces. That particular one-man army moment had been stuck in my mind as a classic tactic to break the morale of an enemy force. A single enemy effortlessly beating down the vast majority of their troops had sent the allied shinobi forces into quite the disarray, at least until the 5 Kage had shown up. Oto and Suna weren't going to get that reprieve this time. The first one to make a move was an Oto shinobi, who was carrying what looked to be an enlarged kunai, whom charged forward and made a large slash at me, the large weapon's path all too easy to read as I blurred from his sight, only to appear behind him, my own kunai slamming into his temple, dropping him like a rock as I turned to a Suna jonin coming up with a pair of kunai in his hands. I swayed through his slashes before lashing out with a hand coated with a chakra scalpel, and ripped his throat apart before spinning out of the way of a flying kunai and quickly detached the connected explosive tag and attached it to the back of a Suna chunin before kicking him into a cluster of other chunin just before it exploded. A man ran up, wielding a katana that he slashed at me only for the blow to be diverted as I used one of my hands to hit his wrist before my chakra scalpel ran through his heart before using his body to block a brace of shuriken. My eyes caught sight of a group of chunin forming similar sets of seals, my Sharingan, quickly filling my mind with the seals before I formed a single one. "Earth release, earth and movement," I announced in a calm voice as the ground beneath the group suddenly began to shake violently, throwing off their concentration from their ninjutsu before rushing in with both of my hands covered with chakra scalpels, to slice through their organs, removing them from the fight completely. A displacement of wind made me roll myself out of the way of a blade made of wind that I quickly traced back to an older jonin who had his hand outstretched. I narrowed my eyes as I formed a single seal and launched a great fireball at him that he managed to get out of the way of, only to move right into a stream of high-pressure water as my water release pressure shot punched through his skull. By this point many of the shinobi were keeping away from me, unwilling to try and get close to me, which was honestly just fine with me as I began forming an actual sequence of seals instead of the single seals that I had been using up until this point. "Fire release, Radiant Dawn," I announced the name of my jutsu as the air around me began to heat up before a ring of flames leapt into life around me and swept over the surprised shinobi around me. I smirked as I looked over the panicking shinobi around me and began forming another sequence of seals. "Who said you were allowed to flee?" I questioned aloud as I finished the seals and stomped on the ground. "Earth release, giant earth core movement." There was a brief moment of perfect stillness as the shinobi felt my chakra flare as I released the S-ranked ninjutsu before the earth violently rocked as the entire area outside of Konoha where we stood, which had to be at least a couple of miles square, dropped into the ground like an elevator dropping. A far more advanced version of the regular earth release, earth core movement jutsu This was usually a jutsu used by many shinobi in unison to share the chakra cost. As a Kage level, just about, kunoichi, I could use it by myself. The shinobi around me froze in fear as they found themselves below ground level, their eyes turning back to me with wide eyes and pale faces as I smirked back at them. Hear me now, I commanded as I began to walk towards a large group of them. You don't face just any other shinobi, you face a god of shinobi. I am Yuriko Uchiha, the sword scalpel of Konohagakure, and most importantly, I am your executioner. You shall be my example to the world of the foolishness of attacking my home. The shinobi around me were frozen in fear, my aura of absolute command, pressing down upon them. It did have a different effect on some people though, as one of the Odo Jonin screamed out as he began to charge me. Screw you. God of shinobi my ass, he cried out as he tried to stab me. I smirked in amusement at his attempt before grabbing the arm that was trying to stab me with and knocked it out of the way before grabbing his throat and channeled my chakra scalpel through his throat and into his lungs before dropping him, leaving him to choke and strangle on his own blood and shredded lungs as I continued to move. Who's next? I questioned in an amused tone, looking over the trapped enemy shinobi. At this point, it was no longer a battle, it was an execution. It seems that your little plan wasn't as subtle as you thought, Orochimaru, Hiruzen commented idly as he looked across at his former student, Inoki and Mei flanking him as they looked at the walls of purple flames surrounded them. Inoki snorted in response to Hiruzen's words. Children like him always seem to think that they can pull the wool over the eyes of his superiors, he commented, giving the snake Sannin a condescending look. Orochimaru scowled in response as he looked between the three Kages before him. Oh, his plan was almost certainly in shambles, but that didn't mean that it wasn't without its backups. A backup he was about to bring forth. It does seem like I'm outnumbered right now, doesn't it? He questioned with a low chuckle as he bit into his thumb and formed some seals. Shall I correct that? Summoning technique, impure world resurrection, he announced, taking glee at the sight of their shock as three coffins began to raise from the earth before them, the kanji for first, second, and fourth marking each coffin. Dust release, detachment of the primitive world, Inoki quickly reacted, forming the needed seals before launching a large cube with a glowing speck in the center, forcing Orochimaru to leap out of the way as the coffins were completely pulverized by the jutsu. The snake Sannin scowled at the Tsuchikage with a vicious look. What? Inoki questioned at Orochimaru's glare. You forget, boy, I have seen the creator use that technique, and he was far smarter with it than you. He would never deploy it right in front of the enemy and expect them to sit and watch him do it. Damn it, if there was one thing he hated, it was when someone other than him was right, but... Well, I guess it's a good thing I did that then, he announced with a chuckle as a pair of forms rose up through the roof next to him, resolving into a pair of figures, very familiar to the two veteran Kages. Hashirama-sensei. Tobirama-sensei. Hiruzen breathed out, sagging at the sight of his two mentors. Orochimaru, you have truly fallen far. Orochimaru chuckled in response. Nonsense, I simply have moved beyond you, he replied arrogantly. How is it? Seeing the faces of your teachers again after so long. Hiruzen sighed as he closed his eyes momentarily before reopening them, his eyes hard. I see, I should have done this back then when you left the village, he announced in a cold voice as the atmosphere around him changed. Orochimaru, as the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, I hereby sentence you to death. Orochimaru's eyes widened slightly before they narrowed. Is that so? He questioned in amusement. And how do you plan on killing me, when you need to deal with you predecessors? At an unseen signal, the reincarnated corpse of Hashirama leapt into action alongside Tobirama, the two charging towards Hiruzen before being cut off by a surge of magma and a cube of dust as the Mizukage and the Tsuchikage intercepted them. We'll take care of these two, Hiruzen, deal with your traitor, Inoki announced as he faced off against Hashirama. Fighting against the second Hokage, quite the daunting prospect, Mei admitted as she stood beside her senior Kage. But, I would be lying if I wasn't curious to see how I stack up against such a legendary figure. Orochimaru frowned in response as Hiruzen stepped past the group facing off against one another to face the snake Sannin. He had been counting on overwhelming the elderly Kage with the reanimated corpses of his teachers before finishing him off himself, but, the interference of Inoki and Terumi threw a wrench in his plans. He was no fool. His teacher, despite being a fool, still held the prestigious title of God of Shinobi, a title that even Orochimaru himself was reluctant to attempt to claim for himself, at least, not until he got his hands on Yuriko and her Sharingan, that is. Hence his plan. He truly didn't think that his resurrected corpses would stop Hiruzen for long, but they would tire him out, leaving him vulnerable to Orochimaru's attacks. Orochimaru's trail of thought was quickly derailed as he suddenly found himself under assault from Hiruzen, whom, despite his advanced age, for a shinobi, was showing none of the wear and tear most would at his age as he engaged Orochimaru with taijutsu. "You always did have an arrogance to you, Orochimaru," Hiruzen commented with a sigh as he swayed out of the way of Orochimaru's fist before responding with a double fist to his chest. "And you never had enough arrogance, old man," the snake Sannin hissed before driving a foot into his old sensei's abdomen and then falling back and thrusting his arms out. "Senai Tajashu." From his arms came a dozen white snakes, lunging out of Orochimaru's sleeves in an attempt to bite, poison and bind the third Hokage. Wind release, breakthrough, the old man unleashed the jutsu without any hesitation, blasting the snakes back and away from him before drawing and throwing a handful of shuriken and rapidly going through hand seals even as they left his hand. Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. The handful of throwing stars multiplied into a veritable wall of steel bearing down on the traitor, who could only blink as he was pummeled with the fusillade of shuriken. "Kaha, good to see Hiruzen hasn't lost his touch with that jutsu of his." Inoki cackled as he dodged a tree branch from Hashirama. Once the storm of shuriken passed, Orochimaru's body collapsed to the ground, and then turned into mud. An earth release, shadow clone, You never get tired of using that particular technique, Orochimaru. Hiruzen sighed, utterly unsurprised by this turn of events. His traitorous student had always had a kind of predictability about him in how he fought, using that particular variant of the shadow clone technique was part of it. Hiruzen leaned forward a bit to dodge the sword of his student before he moved away, biting his thumb as he flashed through some seals. Summoning, Monkey King Enma, he intoned as a cloud of smoke erupted around him, quickly dispersing to show a human-sized primate wearing a tiger skin GI with a Konoha forehead protector. "So, it is finally time, is it, Hiruzen?" Enma questioned, looking unsurprised at his summoning, nor the fact that Orochimaru was their opponent. "It is," was all Hiruzen said in reply before the two charged at the snake Sannin. Inoki frowned as he glared at the resurrected clone of the Shodai Hokage. "This is pathetic," he growled as he used his earth release, lightweight rock technique, to fly around the corpse, dodging its attacks. "The real Hashirama would have already crushed me at this point, you're just a fake wearing his face." Dust release, detachment of the primitive world. The cube-shaped attack plowed into a growth of trees that the corpse summoned to attempt to block the attack only for the cube to disintegrate them instantly. The corpse managed to leap out of the way of the attack only to be slammed by a group of flying rocks as Inoki came flying in with another cube in his hands. "Vanish and go back to the pure realm," Inoki commanded. Dust release, detachment of the primitive world. Inoki could see the briefest of smiles on the corpse's face before the cube slammed into the body, enveloping it and disintegrating every single part of it without pause until nothing remained of either the Shodai or the corpse of the sacrifice. Mei ducked out of the way of a high-pressure jet of water, the stream passing just where her head had been moments before spitting out a globule of sticky magma in an attempt to pin the Nidame in place only for the corpse to dodge out of the way. My, if this isn't his full power, I must admit my apprehension at seeing his full amount," the Mizukage muttered to herself, the corpse making no indication of willingness or ability to speak. Lava release, melting apparition technique, she breathed out a stream of lava at the corpse that rolled out of the way before summoning a dragon made of water in an attempt to crush her. Mei dodged out of the way of the dragon, the water splashing about around her as its form lost its cohesion, a smirk playing over her features. "My thanks, unlike you, I am unable to create water out of nothing without a fairly large expenditure of chakra," she commented facing the corpse with a grin. "But with the water you created." Earth release, rocky dome, the roof they were standing on began to twist and churn before erupting up around the Nidame's corpse, Mei forming new seals before the jutsu was fully complete. Steam release, boiling acid, she blew out a stream of mist into the dome before it completely closed in around the Nidame. "Sorry, I couldn't give you something more dignified, honored Nidame Hokage, but I am in no position to play around." Orochimaru hissed under his breath as he saw the two corpses he had worked so hard to acquire DNA samples for defeated so easily. He had perfected the Nidame's jutsu far beyond what the man had ever expected it to be, but his modifications required a kunai with a sealing tag to be inserted into the Edo Tensei corpses after they were raised in order to restore the target's abilities to 100% and fully suppress their will, something he hadn't had time to even attempt. That being the case, the Shodame and Nidame had only been at about 60% of their total strength at best, less, actually, because they had fought against his will and deliberately made poor tactical choices when fighting the other two Kage. Now he stood alone against 3 Kage-level opponents, which was the opposite of what he had planned when he started this fight. He could summon Manda to run wild in Konoha while he made a break for it, but it would only take 1 Kage to hold the boss snake summon down, 2 if they wanted to deal with him quickly, which left 1 to chase after him, possibly catching him in the process. "Surrender, Orochimaru, you have lost," Hiruzen commanded as he walked forward, twirling the staff form of Enma. "Your forces are being routed as we speak." Orochimaru's eyes flickered out of the barrier for a fraction of a second, and true enough, he wasn't seeing any smoke rising from within Konoha's walls, and all of the shinobi in the arena were Konohagakure, Kirigakure and Iwagakure shinobi, which were all staring at the barrier, waiting to take action. With odds like this, he couldn't feasibly find a way to achieve victory without losing his own life in the process, and he could see the 4 members of the Sound Four looking around nervously, seeking an avenue of escape, especially without the big distraction of the Tsunagakure Jinchuriki going on a rampage in the middle of the village like he planned. There wasn't even a way where he could claim a hostage easily to ensure his escape with. The weakest person in the barrier right now was Mei Terumi, someone who held the entirety of the Kirigakure rebellion up by herself before the receiving aid from both Konoha and IWA. It rankled him badly at being put into such a corner so easily. Everything had been planned out perfectly. Orochimaru actually felt a pang of regret at having killed the Yondaime Kazekage. If he was here, he would have been a perfect sacrificial pawn for his escape. Kukuku, he forced the chuckle out as he put up his image of superiority. "You have survived today, Sarutobi-sensei, but I will see Konoha razed to the ground." He signaled for the Sound Four to drop the barrier and assist him in fleeing before making a hand seal and triggering several explosive notes planted on the roof. Not that he actually planned on helping the 4 of them escape, the only thing they would be good for now was a momentary distraction as he split apart into a multitude of snakes that all fled off in separate directions in the cloud of debris and smoke. The Sound Four moved in to link up with Orochimaru like they had planned, only to freeze when they saw no sign of the snake Sannin, and instead only came face to face with a trio of pissed of Kages with a small army supporting them. Tayuya, ever the smart one of the team, immediately raised her hands in surrender, dropping her flute to the ground. An action the other 3 quickly followed as they felt the killing intent being poured off the professor. Really, being a prisoner was better than being killed without a chance of fighting back. One thing Kabuto prided himself on was analyzing a situation, like their invasion. It was obvious that the entire plan went tits up right from the start, even beforehand, when Orochimaru confidently believed that much didn't need to be altered for the arrival of 2 allied Kages. But everything could still be considered a success with 2 things. 1, the assassination of Sarutobi Hiruzen. The death of the Sandaime Hokage would strike a severe blow to the moral of Konohagakure and catapult Orochimaru into infamy, generating more revenue as people would look to their Otogakure to do their dirty work more. And secondly, the kidnapping of 1 Madoka Uchiha to serve as collateral against Yuriko Uchiha and bring her to heel for Orochimaru's plans. It was a simple matter for the spy to gain access to the clan building the Uchiha were occupying, with the majority of the clan's shinobi assisting with the repelling of the invaders, and while there were a few close calls, Kabuto was still able to get to Yuriko's quarters unseen and unheard by anyone. He quickly dispatched the single Uchiha that was within, some random chunin guarding the daughter of the clan head while the child slept, blissfully unaware of everything happening around it. Grinning, he moved to collect the child when he felt it. A massive killing intent that rivaled the likes of Orochimaru. He quickly leapt away from the child's bed as a bulky figure appeared before him. Kabuto's eyes widened at the sight of Han standing protectively before the child. "I don't know who you are, but you are going to die," painfully, and screaming for mercy, the Jinchuriki growled out, his voice shifting as the Biju's chakra came bubbling out, looking as wrathful as the vessel. "It's not often we both are united about something, so congratulations, you pissed both of us off." Kabuto's eyes widened as he made a move to retreat. Only to be met with a chakra-shrouded fist as Han slammed into him, the Oto spy smashing through the chakra-reinforced walls of the clan building and right to a neighboring one. What the fuck was Han doing here? Kabuto didn't even hesitate as he began bolting for the walls of the village, leaving behind a Kage Bunshin to lead the enraged Jinchuriki on a wild goose chase while he escaped. Really, he should have protested further about changing their plans to accommodate the 2 Kage more, and several Jinchuriki, and Yuriko Uchiha. Really, the entire plan was stupid from the start. A rush of memories told him his Kage Bunshin was already dealt with, but he had gained enough ground that he was confident that the Jinchuriki wouldn't be able to find him. But still, to be safe, he formed another one that made to move towards the child again, hoping to keep the Jinchuriki locked there in case of another attempted kidnapping. Really, they should have just waited longer, but no, Orochimaru had to let his ego get the better of him. He was never going to let this go in future. There were many things Sasuke had experienced in life, the death of his family, gaining a new one, learning under Yuriko, becoming brothers with Naruto, training under Kakashi, encountering missing ninja in Wave. But, all of that experience didn't really prepare him for dealing with a mentally unstable Jinchuriki in the form of Gaara no Sabaku. The second that the war started, Naruto spotted Gaara making a move towards the village and gathered him and Sakura to assist him in pursuing him, sensing the bijou within the boy and knowing if he ran wild within Konoha, then the death toll would be immense. They weren't entirely sure what was going on, but they spotted several teams of Konoha, IWA, and Kiri Ninja teaming up against Suna and Oto Shinobi as they pursued the three Suna siblings to just outside of the walls of the village where Gaara began to go crazy, attacking everyone around him, even his own siblings as they attempted to protect him. Even as Naruto engaged the Jinchuriki, he and Sakura had to still deal with the siblings as, even after being attacked, they still kept on trying to protect him. Then Gaara transformed. And everything went to shit after as Shikaku began attacking them wildly. Naruto blanked out for a moment, a sign that he was speaking to his passenger inside of his own seal as Sasuke and Sakura attempted to keep him covered, Sasuke just barely managing to keep the sand off of them as Shikaku played around with them gleefully. Then, Naruto transformed. It wasn't a complete transformation, that much was obvious as the fox that formed only had 4 tails and was only about half the size of Shikaku, but while it was smaller, it began dismantling the one-tailed bijou. When the hell could you do this, Naruto? Sakura shouted in confusion next to him, clinging for dear life atop of the giant fox as it leapt around the giant bijou. Just about 4 seconds ago, came the sheepish reply of his brother. Listen, I don't know how long I can manage this, but Kurama told me that if we can wake Gaara up, then Shikaku's mind will be suppressed and his form will break down. Right, me and Sakura can do that, Sasuke confirmed, looking up at the forehead of the sand construct where the upper half of Gaara was seen, hanging limply. Can you get us closer? Yeah, no worries on that end, Naruto assured as he leapt around another wave of sand as Shikaku began ranting and raving about something. Really he wasn't paying attention to the beast at this point. Here we go. Naruto leapt forward, bounding off of the wave of sand to get some air, blasting out a blast of air from his mouth to counter the bijous before using his tail to push against a nearby tree to propel them closer. Now! Naruto shouted, prompting the two to leap off of him towards Gaara, only for a wave of sand to leap up to engulf them. Reacting quickly, Sasuke quickly cupped his hands under Sakura's right foot, with the pinkette quickly catching onto his plan, and propelled her further under the wave of sand before forming a quick series of seals. Lightning release, lightning shroud. He shouted as sparks of electricity began to shoot off of him, allowing him to plow through the sand with no resistance. Shinaro, the pinkette roared as she reared her fist back and slammed it into the head of the Jinchuriki, garnering a wince from her teammates. They knew just how hard she could hit when she wanted to. Gaara shouted in pain as he was forcefully awoken, Shikaku screaming in rage at being suppressed again as the 4 of them began to drop to the ground, the sand construct breaking apart as the chakra holding it together dissipated. Sasuke looked over to Naruto just in time to see his fox form fade out as the blonde boy crashed into the ground with a pained groan in time with the others. All of the last-minute hurt, the boy whined as his 2 teammates moved to help him. How? The pained groan forced them to look over to the prone Gaara. How? Are you so strong? His voice was a mixture of pain, pleading, and confusion as he looked at the 3 of them, although his eyes were locked onto Naruto. Because, I'm not alone, Naruto replied as Sasuke and Sakura assisted him to his feet. I think I get you Gaara, not completely, but I get something of what you went through. If I didn't have Nei-san, if I didn't have Sasuke and Sakura, or anyone else who acknowledged my existence, I could have ended up just like you, but Gaara, you're not alone, and we acknowledge you. Gaara's eyes widened in shock as his siblings landed next to him, Kankuro standing before him protectively, holding his puppet at the ready as Temari began to help him up. Temari. Kankuro, he questioned in disbelief. You're our brother, Kankuro said, keeping his eyes on the Konoha ninja. Always have been, always will be, no matter what Dad says. Come on, let's go home, Gaara. Temari said gently as she began to help him move, Gaara doing nothing to stop her in a mixture of weakness and disbelief. He could feel trails of wetness dip down his cheeks as he stared at his sister, as if just seeing her for the first time. I'm sorry, he choked out with a sob. We know, Kankuro assured, moving to follow the 2 as the Konoha ninja made no move to pursue. Is it really alright, letting them go like that? Sasuke murmured quietly to Naruto. Yeah, it's fine, Naruto assured. I don't think there are enemies anymore. Right, Sasuke sighed in response. Come on, let's get back home. Home sounds nice, My bed sounds even better, Naruto groaned. Do you have any idea how painful that was turning into a giant fox? I'm sure you'll be telling us all about it for the next year, Sakura replied humorously as the three began laughing, not even noticing as Rashi watched over them from above. And here I was worried they were in over their head, the man groaned, hearing Son Goku's laughter inside of him. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.